meetings for the and I learned all I wanted to know about Pentecostal people during that time. These particular Pentecostal people, I think some of them would observe the Sabbath, most of them not. Beginning July the 4th, 1933, I began some services in a country schoolhouse 8 miles west of Eugene. Now, two places had opened up for meetings. One was that little church in Harrisburg where I had preached at the end of 1930, and the other was a country schoolhouse, one room with 36 seats. That was the Frobute Schoolhouse. Well, they gave Mr. Oberg, the church, and the Oregon Conference people just put me down in the little schoolhouse. Well, I had a bigger attendance in that little schoolhouse than he did in the larger church. I had 11 baptized, he had none, and there were 8 members of us down there, and with the 11 that were baptized, that raised up a new church of 19 members, and that was the beginning of the Philadelphia era at that time. Then, in October 1933, the new church, which now is the parent of the Philadelphia era, had decided with the Oregon Conference to start a 3-point program on radio and the printing to get out a magazine called The Plain Truth and personal evangelism. And I was asked to head it as the leader. Now, that was started by the Oregon Conference and our people at Eugene, Oregon. Then we moved out from the Frobute School in August to the Gene School 4 miles farther on west, and we held meetings out there on the Sabbath and on Tuesday and Thursday nights. Then in October 1933, I had an opportunity to go on the local radio station 5 mornings for 15 minutes. It was free time, and they couldn't get ministers in local churches to take the time, and so I was able to get it, and of course I didn't have to pay for it. Now, that led to the radio church. There was quite a lot of mail coming in, and the manager of the station asked me then to start a regular Sunday program. I took it up with the Oregon Conference and with our new church there at Eugene. They were all for it, and so the church went on the air, and I did the speaking on the first Sunday in 1934. We went on Sunday morning at 10 o'clock, and the cost was $2.50 a week, and I only had the money pledged from the brethren for $1.25 a week, and I had to take the rest of it on faith. Now, that was all started by the new church and the Oregon Conference. That was the beginning of what we call then the Radio Church of God. February 1st, The Plain Truth came out with its first issue, mimeographed. Only about 350 copies were made. Now, meanwhile, in 1933, I had been issuing a bulletin, which was an ancestor of the present good news that we have in the church. And that was for the Oregon Conference and the new church there at Eugene. Then in April of 1934, I began a campaign in downtown Eugene. Then we changed out of Gene School, holding the meetings there on Monday, Wednesday nights, and on the Sabbath. But Sunday night, Tuesday and Thursday nights, I was holding meetings now in downtown Eugene. From the meetings in downtown Eugene, about 15 were baptized. Now, in September 1934, I began holding Sabbath morning services in my home in Eugene for the new people that had been brought in by the Downtown Eugene campaign. By November 1934, I started a 6 weeks campaign in a schoolhouse out at Alvador. It's another little kind of village about 15 miles northwest of Eugene. It was for 6 weeks, holding nightly meetings Sunday through Friday, then having our Sabbath services as we had been having them. By January 1935, the meetings ended with 15 more new converts baptized, all new members of the church. Now, we had a church out at Alvador, we had one at Gene's school, we had another little group at my home in Eugene, and I was having to pastor all 3 of those churches. The new church held meetings Sabbath a.m. at my home, and afternoons, every other Sabbath I would go to Alvador, and every other Sabbath I would go to the Gene's school. Then in May 1935, all 3 of those little groups, about 15 people attending each place, we decided to purchase the church building in Eugene. But by this time, this Mr. A.J. Ray and Sven Oberg had returned back to California, and they were gone. So now I returned as pastor of the Oregon Conference at a schoolhouse in Jefferson, Oregon, and I still kept on preaching for them. Some people have accused me of having just gone out of the church to get a following for myself and start my own church. That is absolutely not true. I was still preaching as the pastor of this church up in Oregon and in the Willamette Valley. In the meantime, however, in the year of 1934, the Oregon Conference had decided to switch over from Stanberry to the Salem, West Virginia faction of the main church. And now at Eugene, we didn't quite go along with that, but we agreed to cooperate with them. So I became one of their ministers in a way, but I was with them, but I was not under them. I was not under their authority. I was not paid by them. In early 1936, another radio station opened up in Oregon, in Portland, KWJJ, a much larger station. And we went on the air in Portland, Oregon. Now, the Salem ministers persecuted me from the Salem, West Virginia organization. But the members did not, just some of the ministers. They held an annual camp meeting. But one night during that camp meeting, they pulled a double cross and put another minister they'd brought back from the Sardis people from Kansas and put him in as pastor of the church in the schoolhouse up in near Jefferson, Oregon, the Sardis group. Well, it was really a piece of rotten, dirty politics, and the brethren saw it. Half of the brethren in that church, the Oregon Conference, came out and said, Mr. Armstrong, we're going to stand with you. Now, in the meantime, brethren, there still was about 35 brethren up in Jefferson, Oregon, that were still loyal to Stanberry all this time, had not been with us all this time. They now asked me to come up and organize them into a church. I did do that. And that was a new church at Jefferson. In the meantime, the radio work was increasing. The plain truth was increasing. I was holding meetings in different places. And I was still pastoring their churches, however, and pastoring the church for the Stanberry group now, far from having gone out away from them to start a church of my own. Now, early in 1937, a radio station in Seattle opened up to us, KRSC in Seattle. And I preached Sabbath mornings at our Eugene church. Now, we'd bought the church building. I preached there at Eugene. I drove 55 miles to Jefferson, where I preached to the Stanberry group church up there in the afternoon. And then I went on to Seattle. I'd have to drive the car. I arrived up there by or after midnight, sometimes 12:30 in the morning. I had to be up at 5:30 the next morning, go on the radio at KRSC at 8:30, By 9 o'clock, I was off the air, and I started the long drive to Portland. I would arrive at Portland for a 4 o'clock afternoon broadcast on KWJJ.